Mac Jones is a very intriguing prospect to kind of look at. He's one of those guys that you either love him or you don't. It's kind of the same thing with Justin Fields. You either love Justin Fields or you don't. But I think a lot more people can agree that he definitely has more upside. Mac Jones is a guy that he has very low upside. It's like what you see from Mac Jones, he can improve a little bit, on his game, but he doesn't really have that high ceiling like a Trey Lance, like a Trevor Lawrence, even a Zach Wilson or Justin Fields. And some reasons why for that is because he doesn't have the best arm in the world. He pretty much has an average arm. Can definitely make, again, we've seen average arms succeed in the NFL. But, you kind of have to make up for it. And he's not the fastest player. We've seen that he's faster than what I think a lot of people kind of give him credit for. Again, he ran a 4.83 at his NFL Pro Day. And again, on an official time, he ran a 4.68 on an official time. So Mac Jones definitely has some athleticism to him. I think he's more, he's definitely more athletic than the typical pro-style quarterback that NFL scouts claim him to be. But Mac Jones is a guy that he's not very mobile outside of the pocket. He's not a guy that extends plays. That's not part of his repertoire. That's not part of his skill set. He's not one of those dynamic quarterbacks that scrambles outside of the pocket when plays breaks down, and he can throw outside the pocket a lot. That he can scramble and get those yards consistently. He's not a Deshaun Watson, Russell Wilson, Kyler Murray, Josh Allen. Even you can say a Sam Darnold or Daniel Jones. We've seen kind of those quarterbacks start to do it too. But he's not in that category. He's more of a Matt Ryan. He's more of a Phillip Rivers. He's more of a Drew Brees. He's more of a Tom Brady type of quarterback where he is a pro. He is a pocket passer with more. I think he's more athletic than those guys. He might be more of a Drew Brees type of player where he's more athletic in the pocket than when you kind of give it for. But even when you look at his college tape, he moves around, but Drew Brees is definitely was definitely way more quicker in the pocket as far as with his footwork than Mac Jones is. He's very similar to Matt Ryan in that aspect, and that could be concerning because, again, Matt Ryan had a good NFL arm. Matt Ryan was 6'4", he was 220-something pounds. Mac Jones is 6'2", 217, and he definitely has some physical limitations to his game. So I get that from that aspect from NFL scouts when they're kind of saying that he's not a first-round prospect because of his physical limitations. I can understand that. What I can't get, however, though, is the criticism that should really apply to all of the quarterbacks in this draft class, or at least the supposed first-round draft prospects, is the fact that Mac Jones had a lot of talent around him. He had all the receivers. He had the offensive line. Look at the university he came from. And because of his background, they don't produce really great NFL quarterbacks that should be a knock on Mac Jones. Like, it's stuff like that I'm hearing from the top quote unquote, NFL experts or scouting expert that really kind of rubbed me the wrong way. Because at this point, you're just using bullshit as an argument. Because if we're going to use that argument, you can say the same thing for Trevor Lawrence. Now, Trevor Lawrence has everything. He has the upside. He's he's 6'6". He's 225 pounds. He's very athletic. He can scramble outside the pocket. He can make plays. He can make plays on the run. Now, he's not the most perfect prospect in the world. Trevor Lawrence, I definitely have a lot of questions about Trevor Lawrence. But again, people look at the upside, and they've really been looking at it since his freshman year at the University of Clemson. But look at the team that was surrounding Trevor Lawrence. For all 3 years, it's not like Trevor Lawrence was like Deshaun Watson, and as soon as when he was there at the University of Clemson, that they were an average to maybe an above average football team, and again, it's not like Trevor Lawrence transformed Clemson into an elite program. By the time Trevor Lawrence got to Clemson was already an elite program with a lot of elite talent surrounding it. Now, yes, the recruiting numbers might not tell you that, but you look at the draft process, you look at the success that some of those players had at the collegiate level, especially in the ACC, and the fact that Clemson has really dominated the ACC for almost a decade should tell you all you really need to know about the amount of talent that was there at the University of Clemson. Like, when you play with Justin Ross, T. Higgins, when you play with a top 5 offensive line for all 3 years that he's been there. When you are playing under Dabo Swinney, and again, I know that the defensive side, the defensive side of the ball has nothing to do with Trevor Lawrence being an elite, being kind of questioned that way. But at the same time, he has played with elite defenses that's helped Clemson win national championships. So again, if we're going to say, well, Mac Jones played with a lot of talent, then we can say the same thing about Trevor Lawrence, Amari Rodgers, Powell, Travis Etienne. I mean, the list goes on and on about the amount of elite talent that he's had. And then we can say the same thing even with Zach Wilson. Now, BYU didn't end up going to the playoffs and win a national championship, but he did play with an elite offensive line. He did play with a really, really good receiving core set. And then the lack of competition should also be applied for Zach Wilson as well. Zach Wilson played against the North Alabamas of the world. He played against borderline Division One talent. Like, he played against that. The best team, the only competition that was a top 25 team that he played against in Coastal Carolina, ended up beating the absolute crap out of BYU. It was Zach Wilson's worst game. His worst game was against a team that was considered a pretty good team. They weren't Alabama or Clemson or Ohio State, but Coastal Carolina was a top 12, top 15 school that wasn't even a Power 5 team. If Zach Wilson and BYU would have played against their original FBS schedule, when you had Notre Dame and you had USC in the schedule, I wonder how Zach Wilson honestly would have looked. I honestly, would we be even considering Zach Wilson as a top NFL prospect if he played against the original competition? Because if he would have played against his original schedule, and if BYU would have struggled against their, would we really view him as a first-round project? Really? I think that's something that we really need to question on a little bit. So you can say the same thing about Zach Wilson, about what he had at the collegiate level. Justin Fields, again, the last couple of years, all an elite offensive line. The fact that he's had 6 5-star receivers on his roster the last couple of years should definitely say something. He's played with J.K. Dobbins, Chris Olave for the last couple of years. Again, look at the coaching staff that he's been on. He's been on an elite coaching staff on his team. So again, we can really say the same thing about the elite level. And then for Mac Jones, and people say, well, he had Jalen Waddle. He had Jalen Waddle for 5 games. It's not like he had Jalen Waddle and Devontae Smith for an entire season. He had Jalen Waddle for 5 games. The rest was Devontae Smith and John Mechie. And yes, Devontae Smith is going to be a top 15 or top 10 overall pick, and he did win the Heisman Trophy. But let's give credit for Mac Jones. Mac Jones has some really, really good film. And it seems like, again, if we want to just get to the prospect himself and say, well, we don't think he's going to be a first-round pick because of his physical limitations and because he has an average NFL arm and he's not the most athletic in the world, then that's fine. I can deal with that. But when we're critiquing a quarterback because of the level of competition he played with, who he played against, and what school he kind of came from, we need to say the same thing about every other quarterback in this draft class. Because it's not like everyone is like Trey Lance, where they just came from a bottom tier Division I FCS school. And I really even say that because North Dakota State has won national championships. They won more national championships than Alabama. As a matter of fact, Trey Lance as a starter won a national championship, and he had some really good NFL talent on his football team as well. We can really make the same argument with Trey Lance, actually, that he played with some really, really good NFL talent compared to everybody else, which was kind of inferior talent. It's like Trey Lance is probably the most raw out of all the quarterbacks in this draft, out of all the top quarterback draft prospects. But because he has more upside than everybody else, we're now considering him, but we're now saying that he's better than Mac Jones. We're not really giving these critiques to Trey Lance, of the Trey Lances of the world, but we're giving these kind of critiques to Mac Jones. I don't get that. I think it's definitely biased as hell that that's really happening. And it's really unfair to Mac Jones that he's getting all this pushback because teams actually love his NFL film. They love his tape. They love the progression he made from 2019, from what he was kind of nowhere. He was a bottom tier quarterback to literally in a short span of 3 games kind of transformed himself to being a top NFL prospect as far as what you see on film. And then what he did for the 2020 season, yes, with the talent around him, Mac Jones made the most of it. He made the most of it because we've seen quarterbacks with a lot more talent kind of crumble. Baker Mayfield had a lot of NFL talent surrounding him, yet he didn't have the it factor of winning a national championship that year. Mac Jones did. Mac Jones didn't have one bad game in the 2020 season. Mac Jones, when he played against the tougher competition, rose above. And Mac Jones definitely took advantage of every opportunity that was given for him. Not saying that Mac Jones doesn't. I'm not saying that Mac Jones, as far as what NFL prospects are saying about him, that they're wrong. But if we're going to say that he's going to be a second round prospect, let's just say because of just because of the prospect himself, not because of where he came from and what the elite competition that he played with, because that's just unfair to him. Because again, you can say the same damn thing about almost every other quarterback about the talent they played for. And if we're really going to use that damn excuse, then we should have said this shit about Joe Burrow. Because if Terrence Marshall and Jamar Chase gets drafted in the first round, which a lot of people project they do, that's 3 first-round receivers that he's played with, and another first-round prospect in Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and an all-worldly elite offensive line that he also played with. We didn't say the same thing about Joe Burrow. We didn't have these same questions about Joe Burrow, but we're now considering Mac Jones in that factor. That's just not fair for him. Again, grade the quarterback based off of what you see on the film. And again, if you want to include his physical limitations or, again, what he can, or his upside, then that's fine. But don't use the stats or don't use this crap about the talent and where he came from. And because he came from out of Alabama, that they don't, and they don't produce NFL quarterbacks, that's an excuse to saying that Mac Jones shouldn't be a first-round quarterback. That's a shitty excuse. But yeah, I just had to get that off my chest. I know it's a long video, but yeah, I felt like I had to kind of get that off my chest. Mac Jones should be graded fairly, and I think every other quarterback in this class should be graded fairly.